RAF pilots flying Messerschmitts and Luftwaffe pilots flying Spitfires.
And American pilots seeking Germany's most advanced jet projects.
Today, we'll be taking a closer look at another part of the air intelligence war, the battle to capture and test the enemy's planes. Hello, darlings, and welcome back to Spies Ties. I'm Astrid Deinhard.
And I'm Anna Deinhard. Let's jump in. Combat reports from pilots can tell you a lot about the enemy planes and their capabilities, as can stolen blueprints and technical information. But the only way to truly understand your enemy's technology is to try it for yourself.
Although it sounds unlikely, there were actually quite a few ways that the Luftwaffe and the RAF could get hold of each other's toys.
Today we'll have a look at some of those. We'll leave the Japanese planes for another time.
So, how could the RAF get their hands on German planes? Well, the gold standard is for a defecting Luftwaffe pilot to switch sides and bring his intact plane straight into your hands. There are a few cases of that throughout the war.
Crash-landed planes could sometimes also be restored to working order, or at the very least, scavenged for parts. There are also some cases of just sheer dumb luck, like Oberleutnant Armin Faber, who unwittingly delivers a fully serviceable Focke-Wulf FW190 into British hands in 1942.
After an intense dogfight with a Spitfire over the English Channel, Faber becomes disoriented and mistakes the Bristol Channel, which separates southwest England from Wales, for the English Channel. Believing himself to be over occupied France, he descends normally before landing at RAF Pembrey in Wales.
The British ground crew watch on in stunned bemusement before springing into action and taking Faber and his plane into custody. The British can't believe their good fortune. The Focke-Wulf 190 is a much sought-after plane at this time in the war, and now one has just been handed to them gift-wrapped.
One can only imagine how silly Faber must have felt at this moment. Faber, of course, finds himself taken for interrogation and then to a POW camp. But what of his plane? Where does that go?
The plane is flown from RAF Pembrey to RAF Farnborough, home of the Royal Aircraft Establishment, the RAE. Hugh Wilson, commanding officer of the RAE's aerodynamic flight and one of Britain's top test pilots, travels to South Wales to handle the flight personally.
At Farnborough, the plane is put through its paces and is subjected to aerodynamics testing to further understand its engineering and capabilities. 10 days later, it is transferred to RAF Duxford and attached to the RAF Air Fighting Development Unit, or AFDU. Here, it undergoes tactical and combat testing.
Indeed. The Focke-Wulf 190 is tested in mock dogfights against British planes to assess its combat potential against the newest generations of Spitfires. This kind of testing gives designers and pilots an insight into the enemy that combat reports alone cannot provide.
After the AFDU is satisfied with the testing, the plane is passed on to number 1426 Fight RAF. This unit, which is also based in Duxford, specialized in flying captured Axis planes.
Established in late 1941, Flight 1426 tours air bases across the country to provide combat units with demonstrations and hands-on experience with the enemy types. At first, these tours are exclusively for the pilots of the RAF, but in 1426 later performs demonstrations for the 8th and the 9th US Air Forces, as well as anti-air units and the Royal Observer Corps.
This is especially helpful to the Americans, who have been dragging their feet in their technical analysis of German technology, more often simply cataloging what captured equipment is sent to them from Britain.
US interest in German aerospace will intensify later in the war, but in the meantime, British help proves invaluable to the US Air Forces, allowing testing of US fighters against their German counterparts. In particular, the legendary British test pilot Eric Brown helps the 8th Air Force to refine their fighter escort tactics and to identify the P-51 Mustang as most suitable for the role.
Flight 1426 possesses a wide range of German planes, including multiple variants of the Messerschmitt Bf 109, a handful of Focke-Wulf FW190s, and Henkel HE 111, and even a couple of variants of the Junker Ju-88. For flying these German planes in the colors and insignia of the RAF, the squadron earns the nickname the RAFwaffe.
The projects yield other benefits beyond simply understanding German planes better. For example, after capturing a Ju-88 night fighter on July 13, 1944, the British set to work analyzing the German SN2 air radar. Within 10 days, they figured out a way to start jamming the system.
The benefits of such a program to the air war cannot be overstated, but the British aren't the only ones running these sorts of tests, right?
Right. I mean, the Germans must have got their hands on plenty of British aircrafts too, mustn't they?
Indeed. Across the English Channel, the Luftwaffe has something quite similar. The Versuchsverband Oberbefehlshaber der Luftwaffe is founded in March 1942, and its second squadron is formed in 1943 under the command of Hauptmann Theodor Rosarius. They will come to have the nickname Zirkus Rosarius, or the Rosarius Circus.
The journey of a captured Allied plane looks a bit like this. First, it goes for technical trials at the Rechlin test site in western Pomerania. In a book that will be published some years later, Luftwaffe test pilot Hans-Werner Lerche will recall some of the difficulties in testing at Rechlin.
Our work at Rechlin becomes more and more difficult and hopeless as the military situation deteriorates. Many colleagues had already been taken away and impressed into paratroops or infantry units by a specially appointed general nicknamed the Hero Pincher.
After testing, the planes are released to the Zirkus Rosarius in Oranienburg. This arrangement causes its fair share of disagreements. See, when a new and exciting Allied plane arrives, the circus men don't always wait before taking it up for a spin, with all the risk that entails. In some cases, the pilots even manage to damage or destroy the very valuable aircraft before testing is finished at Rechlin. Eventually, stricter protocols are put in place to try and prevent such incidents.
The Allied bombing doesn't help. With the ever-increasing presence of the RAF and USAAF over Germany causing problems for effective testing.
The actual purpose of the Zirkus Rosarius is similar to that of Flight 1426, touring across German air bases and demonstrating the technical aspects of captured Allied planes, and performing mock dogfights.
As well as the testing center in Rechlin, the Rosarius also received planes from Kampfgeschwader 200, the Luftwaffe's elite force, which utilized foreign aircrafts for secret missions.
Planes used by the Zirkus Rosarius include British Spitfires, Hurricanes and Typhoons, and American P-38s, Mustangs, Thunderbolts, and even B-17 Flying Fortresses. Some Soviet types are also tested and used, including the Yakovlev Yak-3 and the Lavochkin La-5.
Speaking of the Soviets, they have certainly captured their share of enemy aircrafts too, so what are they doing about testing?
Well, German aircraft are tested and shown off for the benefits of Soviet pilots throughout the war. But far less information on these tests is ever made public than it is for the RAF and the Luftwaffe. What's interesting is that the Soviets had quite an intelligence advantage over the Luftwaffe in the early phases of the war, didn't they?
Quite so. Some Soviet designers and test pilots had the opportunity to get acquainted with German models while the two countries were still in a marriage of convenience back in 1940. The results certainly made grim reading for the Soviets, who found that Luftwaffe planes were superior to their own in almost every way possible.
Naturally, this provoked a flurry of the new Soviet designs in the years following and gave them a solid base from which to develop some of their highly successful mid-war planes. Further testing of captured Luftwaffe planes later in the war allows the Soviets to tweak their own designs further.
And finally, let's talk about the Americans a bit more.
Yes, let's do that.
Let's do that.
Astrid.
Yes, my dear.
Astrid, ja, Mutter, mentioned earlier, the Americans had done some rudimentary testing of German aircrafts, mainly at Wright Field, Ohio, early in the war. But we're not testing foreign aircrafts on the same scale as the Luftwaffe or RAF. This begins to change in 1944 and accelerates in 1945 as German technology and advanced prototypes come into reach of US ground forces, attracting the interest of the US Air Force.
Lists of German equipment wanted by the US are drawn up, and operations are planned and executed to retrieve it. The code name for this mission is Operation Lusty, a contraction of Luftwaffe secret technology. Lusty will overlap with Operation Paperclip, which we will look at in an episode soon.
As part of Lusty, a team of pilots, engineers, and mechanics entered Germany under the command of Colonel Harold E. Watson throughout April and May 1945 and congregates at Lechfeld Air Base, where US forces have discovered several Messerschmitt 262 jet planes. This team, known as Watson's Wizards, is charged with finding, repairing, and extracting Luftwaffe aircraft to the US for further testing.
Although Germany surrenders at the beginning of May, this mission is no walk in the park. Some areas in the south of Germany and Austria still contain pockets of resistance, including the area around Lechfeld. Lieutenant Robert Strobel receives his order from Watson on May the 20th and travels to the airfield to secure as many aircrafts as he can.
At this stage, Watson and Strobel know that the airfield contains some functional Me-262s, but also that many more have been destroyed or booby-trapped by retreating Germans, or damaged and looted by American troops seeking souvenirs. Strobel anxiously arrives at the combat-scarred airfield and takes stock of the situation. He chooses to spend his first few nights in the bombed-out administration building, with his pistol at his side and a string of tin cans set across the stairs.
The planes at the airfield are declared safe by the 54th Air Disarmament Squadron on June the 2nd, and Strobel and his mechanics set about repairing the aircraft for extraction to the US. Several German mechanics and engineers quickly join Strobel's maintenance crew. As it turns out, many of the Germans on the base are quite fond of their jets and would rather work with the Americans than see their aircraft destroyed.
Yeah, don't take the toys away from the boys. Some former Luftwaffe test pilots are also conscripted by the Wizards, such as Heinz Brauer, Karl Bauer, Ludwig Hoffmann, and Hermann Kersting. Later, Karl Bauer will explain their decision to preserve the planes.
Hey, we're having fun. Why? Okay. After deep soul searching by every individual, we met again and agreed that it was important to save this advanced technology at any price. Therefore, we ignored Hitler's order to destroy all the equipment.
These pilots, as we've seen with the mechanics, are more loyal to the work than to the dying Reich.
To their jets.
To the jets.
To their planes.
To the planes. To their cars.
Okay. Watson's initial haul is taken to the US on the British auxiliary carrier HMS Reaper, which departs Cherbourg on July the 19th. Reaper carries 41 aircrafts, including 10 Me-262s, 4 Raider 230, 4 jet bombers, and a variety of other German aircrafts. Various pieces of equipment are also taken to the testing grounds at Wright Field. This haul will prove to be incredibly useful in the development of the American aerospace program.
Similar British missions exist around the same time. The Fedden mission, led by aircraft engine designer Sir Roy Fedden, investigates Luftwaffe engines and equipment. Elsewhere, Luftwaffe aircraft are extracted to the RAE's base at Farnborough by Air Ministry.
We've seen cracks in the British-American relationships before, and in some places the distrust becomes even more evident. British teams rush to loot facilities currently under their control before they are transferred over to the American occupation zone, and vice versa. British and American teams also enter each other's territory to make off with what technology they can before being booted out.
At the experimental facility Luftfahrtforschungsanstalt Hermann Göring, now renamed RAF Volkenrode, Americans even attempt to sneak equipment out of the facility under the nose of the British personnel. Despite these conflicts, both the British and Americans ultimately managed to return from Germany with a treasure trove of aircrafts, document, and expertise, which will help fuel the aircraft development of both nations in the post-war years.
The Soviets aren't idle either and have their own men gathering up German technology and expertise, though we shall have to save that discussion for another day.
In the post-war conflicts to come, a lot will hinge on who can better take advantage of the German technological goldmine the most, the East or the West?
That is the question. So, that's all we have time for today. But don't worry, we'll be back soon for another episode of Spies Ties. In the meantime, if you would like to know more about the beginning of Operation Paperclip, which ties into these events quite heavily, then click here. And if you like what we do, please consider joining the Time Ghost Army at timeghost.tv or patreon.com. And we will see you next time, darlings.